Welcome, 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 and thank you so very much for tuning in, ladies and gentlemen. This is I'll Call You Back with Izzy Martinez and Cachita Lopez, True Blue Unedited, courtesy of Cachita Latina Radio. It is a pleasure to be here with you guys today. I want to take this opportunity to introduce our host. Our host is Izzy Martinez. For those of you who don't know, he has over 30 years of experience in law enforcement. So, Izzy, why don't you tell us a little bit about that? How'd you get your start in policing?
Well, in 1988, I attended the academy, the police academy, and 1989 I graduated. I went straight to road patrol. I was in road patrol for about a year and a half. Mm-hmm. And from there I went to a specialized unit, the organized crime unit back then, and never came back. I stayed there for 12 and a half years. And from the organized crime unit, I did gangs 1 year, and then I did 9.5 years in cargo theft task force with the FBI, and ended up in public corruption, investigating politicians.
Investigating politicians. How long did you do that for?
I did that close to 10 years, right to the end of my career.
Okay, so what side of policing did you like most? Did that give you a little bit of a rush to be policing the quote-unquote good guys, or did you prefer to be on the street policing who we know are the bad guys?
When I exited the academy and finalized all the training, I wanted to be in patrol. I wanted to have the uniform, the lights, the siren, the car, the badge, and everything else. What happened at that time was that they needed 2 Hispanic officers to do a special operation.
Okay.
Even though we were rookies, they came and asked me and another officer if we were willing to go and get detached to the specialized unit. And that's how it all started. I went there, and I still wanted to go back to uniform. And they asked me, would you like to stay here? And a couple of the old timers said, listen, it takes people years to get here, mm-hmm. and you are still a rookie, and they're willing to keep you here. I would say yes, and that's how it all started. I did mostly investigations involving from organized crime all the way up to cargo theft, gangs, and it was the Vice Squad back at that time, which we were able to investigate any type of crimes.
Really?
Yeah. Any type of crime that was a long-term investigation, we were able to investigate it. Now it's more per unit. They have a narcotics, they have GIU, which is general investigations, and they have different units that are just specialized in certain things. Back then, if we can convince our bosses that we needed to work a case, they would not hesitate and let us do it.
How many members were made up this unit of yours?
The unit was about 20, 25.
Wow. Okay.
But there were 2 different squads, and at times there were 3 different squads with 3 different sergeants. Each sergeant had about 7 officers, 8
Wow.
officers. And it was a lot of fun. Got to drive a lot of nice cars.
Really?
Got to do a lot of crazy things, and it worked out.
And it worked out. So I want our listeners to be able to not just know about your experiences that you've gone through, but also know what's your opinion on a lot of the hot topics today. You know, we deal with a lot of situations dealing with police brutality, acceptable and unacceptable protocol, racism. There's a ton of stuff. Discrimination. There's a ton of stuff. Why don't we start talking about? Well, why don't you just let me know what's your overall view? I know it's a very broad topic on policing today. What's different between, in comparison to when you started and the 30 years that you were there, to the policing, the way that we do policing today?
Well, there's a big difference, and the difference is that back then you had supervisors. For example, the first unit that I was in, the organized crime unit, as a detective, They came on the department in the 1950s, in the late 50s. It was a senior squad. At the beginning, I was a little hesitant because they were old timers and they had their ways. But at the end of the day, they covered your back. And I'm not talking about trying to hide things that you did wrong and what people think that cops do things wrong and they stand up for each other and so on and so forth. What they would do is they would back you up. When it was time to go see the big boss, they would be sitting right next to you. And they would be telling the boss exactly what he or she just told you 10 minutes before. What I see now is that a lot of politics are being involved in this whole thing. The day that politicians stop running police departments is the day that police departments will become police departments once again. We've lost that. We've lost that. For example, where I came from, I asked one day, what happened to our horses? They told me, we don't have horses anymore. We haven't had horses for about 4 to 5 years. And I said, are you kidding me? And why don't we have horses? They're great for riots and a lot of community-oriented events. They will go with the horses. The kid gets to pet the horse, and they like that. Well, we don't have horses because we cannot afford the horses. We don't have the stables, the food, the veterinarian. So you mean to tell me that we don't have a piece of property somewhere in this county that we can put up stables and bring the horses back? The horses work. I've seen them in action. They're very good, just like the dogs. They cut the canine unit a while back, and I don't know if they had beefed it up again, but it was cut like almost in half.
Wow.
Just like the public corruption unit that I was in. That public corruption unit, we were like about 32 detectives. They cut us down to 11. And the next thing you know, we're cut down to about 7 or 8. When I retired, there were about 7 or 8 officers assigned to that.
To that unit.
Yes. What happens is the people don't ask. Who makes those decisions? Those decisions are not made by a police department. They're made by politicians. Politicians will sit there and make decisions, and they really don't care about the consequences.
You know what's crazy? I've had this conversation with a lot of people where I've had people, complain about certain policies that we have in place. And I've said, what are you doing to change it? Sitting on your computer or on your phone, on social media, and just complaining resolves nothing. Put together an actual plan, present it to your city council, and ask to, actually have some sort of follow-up on that. If it really interests you that much. Because if you just sit here and you critique and you do nothing, you can't expect anything to happen. You have to get that's a cool thing that we do have in this county. Citizens are allowed to go to these city council meetings. They're allowed to go to the commission meetings. You can even set up and register to be able to speak, for 2 minutes that they give you to speak so you can talk about your concerns.
Sure.
No one has a time for that. Everyone has 8 hours to be on their phone critiquing. But no one has, 2 minutes to go in and say, hey, I'm not in agreement with this.
But I have a question for you. How many people that have concerns request to ride with a cop for 8 hours and maybe a couple of days and ride different areas of town? Ride the north end, and then you ride the south end. You sign a release, you get in the car, and you get to see what cops do. And that way you can ask questions. Ask them questions. Why do you do this? Why do you do that? Why does this happen? Why does that happen? People don't do that. It's easy to critique when you have no knowledge of what you're critiquing.
Someone told me that was actually an option. I didn't know that was an option just till a couple months ago.
Absolutely.
I didn't know that you can call and say, hey, I'd like to do it's called a ride-along, right?
Sure.
I didn't know that. And I was like, well, that's fantastic. Because you really get to see what's going on.
Absolutely.
What better way to really base your opinion than by firsthand experience?
and ask questions.
Yes.
It also has a lot to do with putting you right with the right officer.
Okay.
If I was to put somebody on the ride-along program or whatever night that person comes out, I'm going to put them with the right officer. I'm going to put them with an officer that's going to be awake and ready to go. And it's going to be going from call to call to call. So you can see the different things that go on and ask questions. In my 30 years, I've had people come up to me and say, one of the things, including my dad, he would tell me, one thing that really upsets me is when I see a police officer come to a red light, put the lights on, and go right through the light and then disappear. Was he in a hurry to go somewhere? See, what people don't understand is, for example, if your house was being burglarized and the neighbor called and said, Kachi's house is being broken into, she's on vacation, she's not there, and I just saw 2 individuals enter through the window, broke the window and entered through the window. Is that an emergency call? In your eyes, is that an emergency call? You own the house and your property inside is yours. Is that an emergency call?
My first instinct will say yes. It is an emergency because it's my property, it's my things that I worked hard for, and how dare someone break into my house? But when you really think about it, material things aren't really a threat. It's not like there's someone in the house. If there's someone in the house, then definitely.
Correct. And that's the first thing they ask, is the house occupied? No, it's unoccupied. She lives there by herself. I know she's on vacation. She is not there. Her cars are not there. So here we have an officer like myself and did it every day that I was in uniform. I would get a call like that. I would put the lights. I would go through the light, the red light, just to get to your house to catch these 2 individuals and put them in jail. Because today is your house and your house is empty. Tomorrow will be somebody's house and they will be occupied and maybe even with a child inside the house.
Yeah.
So I want to put these people behind bars. I want to get there quick. The trick to the story is, if I do that and I get into an accident, I bought the accident. The department will not back me up. I am on my own. I am trying to go beyond my job to get to your house and arrest these 2 individuals. And that's me on my own, because the department will not back you up. They'll say you have no permission. And now with cameras and you have, everybody has a cell phone, they take a video of you going through the light and it's no questions asked. And all the time you're trying to do the right thing and trying to get to your house, not only to save your property, but to stop 2 individuals
from continuing to commit more crimes.
Yes, and people don't understand that. Oh, they must be going to get donuts and coffee.
They're going to go get some pastelitos.
Yeah. So that happens, and people don't understand. So when you do the ride-along, ask questions. Why do cops do this? Why do cops do that? Most of the officers, the large majority of the officers, are hardworking, good people that really enjoy the job and came on the job for the right reasons. I didn't come on the job for the badge and the uniform and the lights and the siren and the authority and all that. I actually went on the ride-along with the city of Miami.
Okay.
And right after that, I said, this is what I want to do. Prior to that, I was a musician. And I said, no, this is what I want to do. And that's what guided me to police work.
Doing that right along.
That night, I rode with an officer that was just one call to the next. He was working. He took his job serious. If you have a problem with working with the public, it is not the right job for you. Go find something else. Go do something else. And I always had a rule. Don't treat the public in a different way that you would want your family to be treated by another officer. And that's the bottom line. Now, there's times that you got to put your foot down and the nonsense has to stop. It has to, because there's no way that a subject can have power over you. No way, whether it's verbal or physical. If it's physical, game is on. If it's verbal, there is no way. No way you can beat me at that. And it has nothing to do with screaming and shouting and pushing and shoving. It has to do a lot with verbal skills and trying to work your way out of that without getting yourself hurt or getting somebody else hurt.
111, 110.
Mi gente, esto sí es café, además de bobería. Ay, el café cachita es como la miel de abeja. Quien lo prueba, no lo deja. Deja que el cerro tenga la llave y que otros bailen al ritmo del pilón. Yo tengo a cachita, directamente del sembrador a tu taza de café. Sabroso. Es mejor para compartir. Ay, Dios mío, no es chisme mío, mi gente, es la verdad. Café Cachita. Ay, Cachita, qué grande eres, mi madre.
Oh, hay ropa bonita aquí. Señor, me hace el favor. Me hace el favor.
Dígame. Tony, ¿conté?
¡Alejo!
¡Tú en una tienda de ropa de mujeres!
Bueno, porque estoy comprándole a una dama para hacerle un regalo.
Ay, qué casualidad. Yo también estoy tratando de comprarle a una dama para ver si me dice que sí, porque cuando hay ropa buena no hay que se resista a decirte que no.
Bueno, pues tú sabes que yo nunca me imaginé que aquí en el medio de Default me iba a encontrar con Alejo.
No es default, es hollarse.
Hollarse está en Default.
Usted me desfolca, pero es hollar. ¡Oh, ya sé! ¡En default!
¿En Default?
¿De verdad que sí?
¿Hollarse?
En default.
Señorita, ¿usted me ayuda?
Te ayuda a lo que está más perdido. Hollarse. No hay más nada.
¡Ay! ¿Y eso qué fue? ¡Ay, me dieron por detrás! ¡Ay, no, espérate un momento! Me voy a ver ahora. ¡Ay! ¡Ay, qué mala suerte! ¡Ay! ¿Y yo dónde estoy? ¿Esto es el paraíso?
No, estás en Your Care Health Network.
Avanza con el pie derecho con Your Care Health Network.
Aquí no le cambiamos su suerte, pero resolvemos todos los problemas de su accidente.
Accidentado, recompensado.
¡La Martelo aquí!
¡Ey!
¡Ay, qué sorpresa!
Y me sorprendiste tú a mí porque yo estaba buscando un regalo para ti, ya que me dijiste que te gustaban mucho las pipas.
Sí,
Adivina cuál te quiero regalar.
¿Cuál me quieres
El
regalar?
del pollito.
¡Oh, qué tierno!
Le quiero regalar el del pollito. Porque se parece a él. Mírale el piquito.
¡Oh, qué chulo!
Como ese piquito que tienes ahí.
Señor, esta es la tienda donde compran los artistas, los deportistas y tú que eres VIP también. Fog Nation. ¿Lo digo?
Con G. Fog.
Ahí está. Mira la careta esa. Uy.
Esas son para ahorita, para la cuarentena, para la pandemia. ¿Quieres una? ¿Quieres ponerte una?
Me vendría bien esa cara. Mira, ya empezó
Con
a
esa
tirarme.
cara le vendría bien una de esas. Él mismo lo dijo. Él mismo lo dijo.
Este es mi Rolex. Y aquí en Grimán Joyería le subimos el precio a tu Rolex con un bisel de brillantes.
Aquí le estamos enseñando los tres biseles diferentes, biseles de $7,000, $3,000 y $2,500 con la esfera de diamante, que ya cuando tú sumas todo eso más el reloj, estamos hablando ya casi $29,000. Por ejemplo, este mismo reloj puede costar ahora mismo, vamos a decir, $7,500. Si le ponemos un bisel como este que tenemos aquí en mis manos, estamos hablando ya de $11,500. Esto es un reloj 36 milímetros, si le ponemos este bisel ya estamos hablando 40 milímetros.
Wow. Grimán Joyería. Lo demás es bobería.
Ay, Dayami, si yo te estaba buscando mi vida. Me dijeron que tú eres la mejor para cotizarme un seguro para mi carro.
Claro que sí, aquí en Diamond Insurance te vamos a hacer una cotización que se ajuste a tu bolsillo y a tus necesidades de seguro.
Ay, mi vida, y con lo caro que están los seguros en la Florida.
Han subido, pero un poquito, pero no te preocupes, nosotros aquí tenemos muchos años trabajando todo el estado con muchas compañías.
Ay, eso es lo que yo necesito. ¿Y qué tengo que hacer? ¿Cómo compro mi póliza?
Nada, con una simple llamada, un mensaje de texto, un email, cotizamos tu póliza completamente gratis y en minutos, porque somos la manera más fácil para asegurarte.
Dayami, aquí, entre tú y yo. ¿Tú sí me vas a contestar?
Claro que sí, nosotros siempre contestamos.
Ay, ¿verdad que un diamante es un diamante? Con Diamond Insurance me siento asegurado.
Segura que sí.
Una flor en la ocasión especial puede hacer la diferencia.
Bueno, cuando las personas vienen a una floristería, tienen múltiples opciones para una persona que está en un hospital, para una persona que ha fallecido, conquistar a una mujer, disculparnos.
Si usted se quiere disculpar porque metió la pata la semana pasada, venga aquí a Cerezo Flower. Ya sabes, 1721 Southwest, 32 Avenida, marca el teléfono 786-326-4412. Haz la diferencia con la persona que tú amas. Una flor.
Do you feel our current police officers, from your experience, the people that you know, do you feel that they have adequate training? Again, loaded question. I know.
Actually, last night I was at a cigar shop, and there was an individual that was sitting with me on the table, and we were discussing that. We get training. We get good training. The only thing that we cannot train, or the departments cannot train, is your heart. If you're a racist, if you have a problem with working with black, white, Asian, Hispanic, do you think $2 to $3 million into a training that you're going to sit there is going to change somebody's heart, not somebody's mind? You're not going to change his mind. You try to change somebody's heart, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But what happens is, you have a problem child that continues to get in trouble, and it works a certain area. If that child, you think, has a problem working that area, then why don't you go ahead and put him in a different area, get him out of that area, because he or she is going to get in trouble, going to get a suspension, get a couple of days off, and after those 2 days, they're coming right back to the same thing again. And now, not as much as before, you don't see it as much. I tell you, the people that I work with, I don't know if I was lucky. Like I was telling my family the other day, I must have been extremely lucky, because the majority of the people, the majority of the officers that I work with, the best. I would consider them the best. I would go to the end of the world for them. Now, are there some that should have never become cops? Absolutely. Absolutely. And what people don't understand is, you as an officer, you know who they are. You know who they are. But they ask you, speak up. There's nothing to speak up. They know. They know who they are. But the majority of the officers, men and women, and even the canines, are there every day to protect this community and all the communities.
That I really do feel that. I really do feel that the majority of our cops are good cops. It's just sad that those bad apples give such a bad reputation to the entire, law enforcement
Sure.
field. And remember, everything's based on perception. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. It's how people perceive you. So for a very long time, we've seen a big disparity, and we've seen a lot of focus on these topics. And it's crazy because I started to be devil's advocate a little bit. I'm very outspoken about my opinions and against injustice and da-da-da-da. That's
You?
why.
No.
No, God forbid, right?
No.
No. Entonces, what's crazy is I've encountered a lot of people that unfortunately we become very extremist, and we can't really seem to process a certain situation without getting so wrapped up emotionally into it. And I made various comments on not supporting any sort of brutality, any sort of injustice across the board, right? And all of a sudden, people started commenting saying that I was anti-police, or that I was anti-this and anti-that. I go, I am not anti-police. I respect our police officers. I respect our military personnel. I'm the girl that when you're behind her in McDonald's or at Starbucks or wherever, and I see a police officer, I go ahead and I cover their meal.
Sure.
Or let's say we're getting coffee, and I walk by and I say, hey guys, thank you so much for your service. Stay safe. I have a deep, deep, deep respect. But that does not mean that I need to be blinded to the fact that there are things that are going wrong. And the statistics show that there is a vast disparity in the way that some subjects are treated. You know?
You have to understand that they've made this. When I say they, I'll be more specific in a bit. But they've made this a black and white issue when it comes to police. But if you notice how many black officers have been killed in the past couple of years, it doesn't make sense. So if that's your sales point of why you're behaving the way you're behaving, it doesn't make sense. Because you're killing black cops, white cops, and Asian cops, Hispanic cops. So your problem is not with the police. Your problem is with the uniform and authority. Mm-hmm. And that's a big problem. And that's a big issue. What happens is we have a lot of politicians that want to cater to these groups. And they want to sit there and go, yes, I feel your pain. They don't feel nobody's pain. Because unless you're on foot working some of these communities, whether it's black, Hispanic, Asian, if you don't get out of that car and you haven't walked the street, ran the street, and gotten into brawls in these streets, how can you make a decision that's going to affect so many people? What they do know how to do is they know how to play both sides of the fence. They have that down packed.
Of course.
And that's
very convenient when it's done from the comfort of your office in AC, echando de fresco.
Absolutely. And that, it was a big issue with me. I tell you that in my 30 years, especially working public corruption, when the public corruption unit was cut down from somewhere like 30 to, I don't know, was it like about 11 of us? I survived. I stayed there because I was a senior officer. Okay. But there was a lot of good detectives that were sent back to uniform and sent back to other assignments that they did not want to go because they were happy where they were at. They were doing a great job where they were at. Who made the decision to do that? Take a guess.
Our politicians.
Our mayor. So he sat there, he made a decision, says, no, we're going to cut it down, and we're going to go ahead and make a task force with the state attorney's office. And what they did is they opened up a task force with the state attorney's office, doing the same thing we were doing.
But they didn't have to fund it.
Correct. Yes, it came from the state attorney's office, but the other thing that I see it a little bit of a conflict of interest. Because when it came to the police department, I had no problem investigating any politician. As a matter of fact, I was in investigations where we put police officers in prison. They were corrupt. They weren't racist. They weren't loud and obnoxious. They were corrupt. They were doing illegal things. Because see, like a supervisor told me a while back when I started, says, Izzy, you can go ahead and violate every standard operational procedure in the book as far as the departmental manual goes. And we can justify it, and I will go to bat for you. But don't ever violate the law. There's a law book, and don't ever violate the law. Don't ever put me in that situation. Don't ever put yourself or your family in that situation.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget. And that was in 1989, 90. And I still know his home number because I used to call him up. I used to call him up at 2 o'clock in the morning because I was doing an undercover operation and I needed to go out at 2 o'clock in the morning. And he has so much trust that he would say, why are you calling me at 2 a.m. to tell me that you're going out with DEA or the U.S. Marshals or ATF? Why are you calling me to let me know? Just let me know if something goes wrong. I trust you. I'll never forget that. So in the morning, I would let him know and give him a briefing of everything that went on. It just hurts that you leave your blood, sweat, and tears out there in these communities, and there's a minority that really, they don't care. And what they do is they hold hostage the majority of the good people in those communities. They're holding hostage the majority of those people in those communities, because not everybody's bad. You go to a project and you say, wow, look at all the people walking around and riding bikes, and they're probably all selling dope. They're not all selling dope. It's a minority. And that minority is holding hostage these neighborhoods. And enough is enough. Defund the police? No, you need to fund the police. You need to give them more money. You need to make a task force. You need to make more task force. I'm a believer. Get the feds like we did. I was detached to the FBI for years. Let the FBI come in. Let the ATF come in. Let the U.S. Marshals come in and sweep them up and get them out. Let these kids, a lot of these kids can't even go outside and ride a bike because their parents are terrified.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not fair.
And there's been countless cases of innocent kids that have just been shot and killed by drive-bys, which is, inconceivable, right? That we would still be living like if this were the wild, wild west.
But who cares?
No one.
I'm going to tell you who cares.
You know who
the
cares?
Majority of the good people in those communities care. That minority is like a venom spreading through the community.
What happens? Our politicians, and I know a ton of politicians, and I still love you regardless if you decide not to talk to me ever again after me saying this, which is fine. There's a lot of our politicians that are on the fence, and every time it's time to vote, be it their term is a 2-year, a 4-year, a 3-year, a 6-year, whatever, they come around and, wow, we need your support. And they'll go ahead and they'll do a community food drive, or they'll do a book bag handout. Make sure that flyer's in there. So if you go out and vote, which the majority of our people do not go out and vote.
Correct.
Right? So those few people that go out and vote are going to vote for you. And then that same community is forgotten for another 3 years, for another 4 years.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's a horrible pattern. It's a horrible pattern. I've seen it. I grew up in the inner city, okay? And I went to school my whole career in the inner city. So I have a very broad perspective of stuff. And I was blessed enough to work with, to be a student of people that actually cared about their community.
Sure.
I had one principal that later became a state rep, who's now school board, who I went to this school that had this magnet program in the heart of Liberty City, behind a dump, in between literally the dump and the projects. Okay? This is a great location, right?
Yes.
And I recall I recall I went there, my sister went there, my brother went there, all through the same Magna program. I recall that my principal, when kids wouldn't show up to school, she would literally go to their houses and knock on their doors and ask their mother, where are your kids?
Absolutely, yes.
Where are your kids?
Absolutely.
And get them into school. And then she created this project that trained, she took mothers that were on welfare, right? This is real community activism. This is actually caring about your people and doing for your people. So when I see people that do the opposite and are just out there for show, it kills me. So she had this program where she brought in the moms that were on welfare, and they would start volunteering at the school through PTA, helping out in the office. They would get training. If they needed their GED, she'd help them get their GEDs to the point where they would get off of welfare. That is what our politicians should be doing, having that sort of contact with their community, that sort of interest in their community, regardless if it's convenient or not. And unfortunately, that's not the case.
No.
People, I'm telling you, it's crazy. If you just look at it, every 4 years they come around, because I need your votes now. And they really cater to the older generations, which are the ones that do like the mail-in voting and the early voting.
Absolutely.
And then that
Been
takes
there and
us,
done it.
It takes us to another point where you have a ton of people that I know, incluso that work for the county and work in a ton of these departments. That,
Yep.
Oh, our mayor did this. Oh, our mayor did that. Did you go out and vote, bro? No, right?
Correct.
We can go and we can stand in line for 8 hours to get the latest iPhone, to get a new pair of shoes, to get the latest game that's coming out, but we can't be bothered to mail in a ballot. We can't be bothered to stand in line for 30 minutes to go vote. I mean, our last primary election a couple weeks ago, our voter turnout was 27%.
We're not going to solve this problem. We, as a community, have to be smarter and hold those politicians accountable for all this stuff.
We are allowing them to manipulate the entire game. The entire game. And that affects our policing. That affects our firefighters. It affects everyone. Everyone. One thing that we talked about not so long ago was about the whole mental health issue.
Right.
I have a sister that works for dispatch. I've seen how her being on there has affected just receiving the phone calls. Now, if you have police officers, right, they have to, that's their bread and butter, 40, 60 hours a week, they are encountering negative situations. No one calls the cops and say, hey, I won the lotto.
Never.
Hey, I'm having a great day.
Never.
Can I treat you to lunch? They don't call the cops for that. It's a shooting, it's a stabbing, it's a domestic violence issue, it's a car accident, it's a heart attack, it's these horrible situations, and the public has this perception that our police officers are like these invincible people, and they're strong and they're valiant and they're courageous, which they are, but they're people.
We're human.
You're human.
And
You're not computers.
Human. Trust me, I retired at the right time. I retired. So this is it.
Nos fuimos.
Yes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, again, we want to thank you so very much for tuning into our show today. Once again, this is I'll Call You Back, True Blue Unedited with Izzy Martinez and Cachita Lopez, courtesy of Cachita Latina Radio. We want to thank you so very much and invite you to come on back tomorrow at the same time, same dial, and we'll be targeting a few more things for you.
See you then.